order this meeting of the Planning Board on Tuesday, May 26, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. We're doing this remotely via Microsoft Teams. And I would ask, just to reinforce what Karen said a minute ago, everybody make sure that you are muted, and also that preferably you don't have video on, so we're not using up bandwidth. With that, I will ask Tim to review the procedures for this type of meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tim Corwin. I'm with the Planning Department. David Brooks, the Planning Director, is also on the meeting, as well as Brian Vincent, the City Engineer, and I believe City Manager Mulholland is with us, at least for a portion of the meeting as well. I just have some opening remarks. If you've participated in a land use board meeting in the past month or two, you have heard these before, so please bear with me as I repeat the same information. Due to the coronavirus pandemic and pursuant to Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, issued on March 23rd, 2020, in accordance with Executive Order 2020-04, the Lebanon Planning Board is authorized to meet electronically without a quorum physically present in the same location. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with Emergency Order Number 12, the City of Lebanon has taken action to provide public access to the meeting by telephone, with potential additional access by video, to provide public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, and to provide a mechanism for the public to alert the Planning Board during the meeting if there are problems with access. For this meeting, Microsoft Teams is being used as the communication platform. All members of the Planning Board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and to participate in the meeting by visiting lebanonnh.gov/live and clicking on the link for the May 26th, 2020 Planning Board meeting. Instructions on how to attend are provided on the webpage. To assist in the preparation of the meeting minutes and to ensure all participants are aware of who is participating, we ask that all speakers identify themselves before speaking and to spell their first and last names. Likewise, we do ask that all board members and staff please identify yourself before speaking. In order to ensure the best possible transmission of the meeting content, it is suggested that you disable the camera on your chosen device to reduce the video feed and increase the available bandwidth for all attendees. To improve sound quality and reduce the amount of feedback in the system, microphones will be muted by staff until you have a question or comment. For people using the Microsoft Teams platform, you can unmute yourself by clicking the button on the screen. For people calling in by phone, please press *6 to unmute yourself. If anyone has difficulty with access during the course of the meeting, please email us at planning@lebanonnh.gov, or you can use the chat function on Microsoft Teams to indicate the issue that you're having. If we can provide technical assistance, we will try to do so. However, if we are unable to do so, which is more likely than not, it is still worthwhile to be aware of the problems that participants may be encountering so that we can try and address those for future meetings. In the event that we experience widespread and severe technical difficulties such that we are unable to continue holding the meeting tonight, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that it's not expected that we will reach a decision this evening on the agenda item 2B, I believe, the Bank Street project. I expect that the board will continue that to a future meeting at the close of the meeting tonight, or near the close of the meeting tonight. Just a few more notes. Please note that all votes that are taken during the meeting tonight shall be done by roll call vote. Please note that there may be a delay between the time that something is said and when you hear it at home. Please be patient as we try and manage that delay. Again, we ask that you not use the chat function unless you need to communicate that you're experiencing technical difficulties. And again, there's only so much, if anything, that we're going to be able to do about that tonight, but it is good to make a record of it. Finally, please note that this meeting is being recorded. It will be available on the city's website, lebanonnh.gov/agenda center. And with that, I will turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Tim. I will now proceed to roll call of members. Before doing that, I regretfully have to inform members that Sarah Welsh has decided to resign from the board. She's been with us since she left council. She's certainly been a very vocal member of the board, dedicated to all of the different projects that we've dealt with during her time on the board, and we're very sad to not have her with us anymore. And Matt Hall cannot make tonight's meeting. So with that, I will proceed again, just to remind you, when I call your name, please say present and whether you're alone or not. So I am present and I'm alone. Gregorio.
Yes, present, alone.
Thank you. Jim.
Present and alone.
Joan.
Present and alone.
Laurel. Laurel Davis, are you there?
Sorry, I had muted my microphone. Present and alone.
Thank you. Kathy?
Kathy is here and alone.
Thank you. And Tom?
Tom is here and alone.
Thank you all. All right, so we had, that confirms what David said earlier, we have a quorum. So let me outline the plan for this evening. Once again, we have,
No, it's fine. Happened.
would you please mute yourselves? Once again, we have a very full agenda. So we're going to attempt the following. We will take hopefully less than 30 minutes for the Mary Hitchcock Memorial Hospital application. We'll then proceed to the Bank Street. And as Tim mentioned, we don't expect to make a conclusion. This will be the first time that we have a full debate. And we will take a maximum of 2 hours on that. And then once that 2 hour has passed, we will move on to all of the administrative. Please mute yourselves. All committee reports and other business. So for the Mary Hitchcock application, we'll start with 2A right now. We've already reviewed this, as continued from a preceding meeting. We're going to ask Sean to make a statement on behalf of the city's view of the possible allocation of costs that we've been discussing. I'm going to ask Joan Monroe to read a revised draft motion that will be displayed for members to review. Then I'll ask for any comments from the public, and then we'll proceed to a vote on the motion. So, Mr. Mulholland.
Yes, this is Sean Mulholland, City Manager. There's been a number of issues in regards to the various projects that are being proposed, including the DHMC project and the various commercial residential properties, Mount Support Road. There's engineering studies, which I believe you folks are all aware of. All of those talk about bits and pieces of things that may need to be done for their individual projects, but they don't deal with the collective impact of residential development as well as the development by the plan development by the hospital. We've had discussions with developers, the planning department, for some time, trying to work out some sort of agreement, but it's really impractical in which to do that, to allocate those total costs of the intersection improvements that would need to eventually be done at LaHaye and Mount Support Road. So one of the options that the city does have is a special assessment district capability. The law in RSA 52A7 allows for that to happen. And what that in essence would do is the city could, and it has done in some other cases, apportion a cost or all of the cost to those intersection improvements to the existing and any new developers who come into that particular area that use, per se, that intersection. And it's based upon their usage of that particular area, of that particular intersection. So that's something that we have talked to at least two of the developers. I think actually David's talked to all of them, but had in-depth discussions with two of them. And at least two of them, that makes sense to them to at least proceed in that direction, because there's no way to be able to assess what we estimate to be about $2.5 million in intersection improvements, because who knows whether some of these other projects are going to come or go. And certainly we don't want the taxpayers to be on the hook for the type of intersection improvements that need to occur there. So my plan is if these developments go forward and we have those pressures on the intersection, is to go before the council and request a special assessment district to apportion those costs to those projects that are up there and to DHMC and the college. The difference between regular property taxation and a special assessment district, it applies to the college as well as DHMC, where regular property taxation does not. And they would be liable for their portion of the cost based on the amount of activity that's generated by those entities.
Thank you. Staff, do you have any further comments?
Mr. Chair, this is Tim Corwin. We have been working with the applicant. We've been having ongoing discussions internally about how to craft a condition of approval that reflects the planning board's original intent, as well as the developments since then, including the idea of creating a special assessment district. And so with all of that in mind, we did create or update the traffic mitigation condition of approval that is at issue as part of this hearing. I will go ahead and share the proposed language on the screen here. Just give me 1 second. Can everyone see that?
Yes. So this is just part of it. This is the paragraph that we're talking about.
Correct. This is the substantive portion of this site plan amendment, which was essentially to change the timing of the applicant's responsibilities with respect to developing a traffic mitigation plan from prior to issuance of a building permit, as was originally suggested, perhaps for lack of any other better ideas, to now requiring that task to be completed prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. And I think that's the core of the applicant's request, to change the timing of when that obligation must be satisfied. But at the same time, we have massaged the language here to create some additional flexibility. And the idea is that this condition requires the applicant. It's not a suggestion. It's required. The applicant's required to work with the city to develop a traffic mitigation plan. And to the extent that the applicant has any specific financial contributions related to that agreed upon traffic mitigation plan, those amounts need to be paid prior to the issuance of the CO. If the city were to adopt a special assessment district, then that would effectively be the plan that is envisioned and required to be developed under this proposed traffic mitigation condition of approval. So, given the amount of information that we have at this time, which is relatively limited, we think that this condition, as crafted, is probably the most flexible that we can do for right now, and is probably the best approach. But that would be up to the planning board to decide, of course. And finally, this specific iteration of this condition of approval was only sent to the applicant about an hour, a little over an hour ago. So they may not have had time to review in detail. I suspect I suspect they'll concur in the wording, but we should probably ask them for their thoughts and views on this.
All right. Before I get there, so I just want to remind members, it's always difficult with this technology. I don't know if you're looking at the papers that we received for the prior meeting, the May 11th meeting, and there is one page, which is page 4 of the staff memorandum, that has the prior iteration of this paragraph along with the whole motion. So if you're looking at that, then this number 2 replaces the number 2 on that page.
Exactly.
Any questions from board members?
Chair, this is Kathy.
Yes, Kathy.
I understand that this wording addresses the hospital's responsibility, but in previous conversations the planning board had with other developers along Mount Support Road, we were also addressing the Old Etna Road and Mount Support Road intersection and the sidewalks from Route 120 to LaHaye Drive. And I'm wondering, since we were talking about having everyone, basically making their contribution to the same project, is there an intention to include those other two areas to this paragraph?
I don't think to this paragraph, certainly within the special assessment area, they would all be part of that. But the difference here, Kathy, is that Dartmouth Hitchcock is looking for a way of moving ahead with the construction, and so not agreeing to the substance of this paragraph as part of their building permit, but rather waiting until they get to the certificate of occupancy. So I think the intention is the same for all four. Tim, do you have
I
any
guess
comments?
I'm still confused whether this particular paragraph is going to be something that is given to the other three applicants that are proposing developments.
Yes, this is Tim. Yes, this it won't be exactly the same, but it'll be very, very similar to the proposed conditions of approval that you'll see for 401 Mount Support Road, 343 Mount Support Road, and if and when it comes in, 402 Mount Support Road.
But will any of those include the Old Etna Road intersection and the sidewalk along LaHaye Drive?
This is Tim again. I'll defer to David and Brian Vincent about that, but I think the problem that we're seeing is not necessarily at that intersection, but it is in fact at the LaHaye Drive and Mount Support Road.
Yeah, this is David Brooks. The traffic studies for the different projects show that the Old Etna Road, Heater Road, Mount Support Road intersection is operating at an A level of service, and it is between an A and a B in the weekday PM existing conditions. So although there's no specific need to fix anything at that intersection based on the traffic studies, and the segment of multi-use path along LaHaye between Route 120 and Mount Support Road is the subject of a Transportation Alternatives Program grant, where the state is paying 80% of the cost of that project, up to, I believe that their share would be up to $640,000. The Dartmouth College, Dartmouth Hitchcock, and the city have partnered together to fund the other $160,000, the other 20% share. So that would not be subject to this condition either.
And assuming that these developments are all eventually built, are we thinking that the Old Etna Road Mount Support intersection won't be impacted?
Let me check I cannot say that it won't be impacted, but looking at the traffic study, as soon as I get to that page, the build scenario, it doesn't change. The overall level of service is A in the morning and A or B in the afternoon still. So it's not suggested that there's a need to address that intersection at the moment.
Other comments from board members? So I will now open the meeting up to.
Mr. Chair,
Who's that?
is it too late to ask a question?
No, who's that, Laurel?
Yeah,
Yes, please, go ahead, Laurel.
thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the nature of the commitment on behalf of the state for that 80% funding? The state is in a pretty precarious financial situation right now, and I'm wanting to know what guarantee we have that that funding will actually be there?
The LaHaye Road, LaHaye Drive multi-use path project is programmed in the 10-year plan currently. The funding is programmed for 2023, but they have assured us, or the last time we went through the Gasset hearings here, they said if we get that project designed and ready to be bid sooner than that, and other projects that are programmed to be funded sooner are not ready, they will flip projects around to allow us to move forward. So you're absolutely right that the state is in a precarious situation, as you put it. All I could say is that this project is in the 10-year plan, with funding is programmed for 2023.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a follow-up question?
Surely.
So, David, what happens if the state decides it just needs that money for something else, and we have already agreed to go forward with this? What are the implications for the taxpayers?
I think there would only be implications for the taxpayers if the city decided to go ahead with the project. If it is a design that we've committed our 20% share toward, and the project is designed and ready to be bid, but the state has not committed its share to allow it to actually be constructed, then it would probably sit as a project waiting to be constructed until either the state comes up with its share or some other form of funding materializes. I don't believe, in the conversations that we've had, that staff has had with any of these four applicants, the specific segment of multi-use path along LaHaye between Mount Support Road and Route 120 has not been part of those discussions.
Thank you.
All right, I will now open this portion of the meeting up to the public. If anyone from the public wishes to comment, this would be an appropriate time to do so.
Mr. Chair, this is Tim Corwin. Do we want to invite the applicant to respond to any of this?
Absolutely. Applicant, yes. If the applicant is with us in the public.
Dartmouth Hitchcock, this is Tom Goins.
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you all?
Good.
I apologize. I'm calling in from out of state today. But I have read the language, and the hospital continues to be committed to work with the city to identify the necessary mitigation to the failed intersection. We still have, as a shared objective with the city, the objective to increase the pedestrian and bike routes from the hospital to these housing developments. I think the challenge is going to be, as we go forward, what the final price tag on all this is. I think that estimates now are ranging, $2-3 million just on the failed intersection. The hospital has already contributed to the TAP grant for the ped bike work that David referenced. And again, we continue to be in agreement with the city in our objective to increase that pedestrian and bike path communication. I think it's just, we need some time to figure out how we can design the mitigation to this failed intersection, how we can achieve the objectives of the desired ped bicycle lanes, and then how we can attribute the expense in a fair manner. But we're committed to the objectives. So we're in support of the language that has been put forth.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate, particularly phoning in from out of state to make this meeting. Do we have anyone else from, not the applicant, but just from the general public? I don't hear anyone, so I will close the public hearing. I'll come back to board members. Do board members have any further comments, anything further to deliberate before I ask Joan Monroe to read the motion?
Chair?
Yes.
Monroe here.
Who's
Monroe
that?
here.
Yes.
Monroe here.
Yes, Joan.
Well, I'm looking at the recommendations for the approval from the 5/11 meeting. So I see that number 2 is quite a bit different. And I don't see number 1 because you only have put number 2 on the screen. It's not a big deal.
Did you receive a message from Tim Corwin?
Today?
Yes, today.
No.
I don't check my email every minute, so I would have to say no. It may be there, but I haven't looked at it. I never expect to get last minute information of any kind of substance.
All right, well, I'll note that going forward. That's my fault. I should have phoned you to alert you that this was coming. So Tim has helped me out of this situation by putting the beginning of this motion. So if you can see that, Joan?
Yep, I
would you
do.
be so kind to read that motion into our deliberations?
Okay, I will. Let's see. Joan Monroe moved that the Lebanon Planning Board approve the application of Mary Hitchcock Memorial Hospital for an amendment to an approved site plan, PB 2019-37-SPR, for a proposed 5-story plus or minus 212,528 square foot patient tower expansion at 1 Medical Center Drive, Tax Map 10, Lot 8, to accommodate additional handicap parking and to modify a condition of approval, number PB 2020-15-SPA, as shown on a plan set titled Patient Care Tower Expansion Project, prepared by VHB, date issued November 12, 2019, revised April 13, 2020, project number 52590.00, 3 sheets, including any and all submissions and testimony provided for and during the public hearing, with the following conditions. And on my screen, I can't see all of number 1. Okay, thank you. Number 1, the applicant shall comply with all conditions of the Planning Board's Notice of Action dated January 13, 2020, number PB 2019-37-SPR, except condition number 5, traffic mitigation. Number 2, as demonstrated by the applicant's traffic study, the Lehar Drive and Mount Support Road intersection is currently underperforming, and its level of service will further erode with the additional traffic that the new tower expansion will generate. Consequently, the applicant shall work with the City of Lebanon to develop a traffic and pedestrian improvement plan for the Lehar Drive and Mount Support Road intersection and vicinity to help mitigate the anticipated increases in traffic generated by the applicant's use and to accommodate the needs of employees living within walking and/or biking distance of the hospital. The applicant shall be obligated to contribute its fair share to the cost of any proposed traffic and pedestrian improvements in an amount that shall bear a rational nexus to the traffic and pedestrian impacts reasonably calculated to be caused by the applicant's use. Any financial contributions from the applicant required pursuant to the mitigation plan of action shall be paid prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. Any dispute between the applicant and the city regarding the applicant's responsibilities pursuant to this condition may be appealed to the Planning Board.
Thank you, Joan. May I have a second to the motion?
This is Tom. I second the motion.
Thank you, Tom. Any discussion on the motion?
Chair, this is Kathy. I just have one question.
Yes, Kathy.
In the event that the hospital doesn't build this tower, but the other developments along Mount Support Road go in, will the hospital be obligated to contribute anything to the improvement of this intersection? Or is it only required to do that if they expand the tower?
It's an interesting question. I defer to staff on that one. I would think that not, but I don't know.
Mr. Chair, if the city moves forward with the creation of a special assessment district that includes the hospital property, then they would contribute their fair share based on existing traffic generated by that facility. Whether or not it includes the patient tower expansion or not, I believe.
This is Tom from Dartmouth. That is my understanding as well.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments from board members? All right, before I proceed with the vote.
Chair Garland, I had a comment. I'm sorry, slow on the draw. This is Monroe. Because I think that because this change came today, we do have a representative from the college with us, and we do have both members of our planning department, Mr. Brooks and Mr. Corwin. So I'm going to trust and assume that this agreement and this condition is acceptable. So based on that, I will vote in favor of it.
All right, I haven't started the roll call votes, but I appreciate your comment. Before I start to ask who's in favor or against, I realized that I went too quickly at the time of the roll call. I overlooked appointing Gregorio as a member this evening so he can vote on everything that we'll be deciding. So with that, I vote in favor. Gregorio?
I have to recuse myself of this application.
This is the hospital, not the college.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm an employee of the college, so if it doesn't cross over into the hospital, then I can vote.
I think so. David, opinion?
Dartmouth Hitchcock, as I understand it, is a umbrella organization. Tom, Mr. Goins may be better able to answer that. This is absolutely not the college specifically, but the connection between those two organizations. I would prefer to have Mr. Goins elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I think, David, what you're referring to is the condominium relationship between the hospital and the college. So I guess the answer to the earlier question is, if we're talking about existing traffic counts, it would have implication on both. If we're talking about traffic counts that are additional traffic counts as a result of the tower expansion, that would only be an implication on the hospital. So to the gentleman from the college's question about recusing himself, it will have implication if it's a tax assessment on the condominium as a whole, which is apportioned both to the college and to the hospital. So he may want to recuse himself.
All right. So thank you very much for that. That is not something most of us understand. So I'll put you down, Gregorio, as recused. Thank you. Jim?
Councillor Winnie votes in favor.
Thank you. Joan?
Joan votes in favor.
Laurel?
Laurel votes in favor.
Kathy?
Kathy votes yes.
And Tom?
Tom votes yes.
So I have that as 6-0 and unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, we're now going to move on to the Bank Street application. And I just want to take a moment to advise everyone how we're going to use the time this evening. I'm first going to call on David Brooks to just give us an overview of the board's jurisdiction in regard to applications. Secondly, we're going to ask the applicant to make a presentation. I'm expecting that to be roughly 20 minutes. Thirdly, we'll hear staff comments. Again, 20, 30 minutes. We'll then have a debate among the board members for about 30 minutes. And then I will open the meeting to the public for the remaining time in our 2-hour allotment. I will be asking for abutters who wish to speak to go first as priority. And I will also ask people, if you have already filed letters or emails, those are part of the public documentation. So in terms of time, I'd ask you not to make comments that are redundant with what's already been filed in writing. So with that, I will turn it to David Brooks.
Yes, thank you. This is David Brooks, Planning Director. Just as a reminder for the board members and the public, this application is pending before the Planning Board under the Site Plan Review Regulations. It is also subject to the city's zoning ordinance in terms of certain the use and some of the dimensional requirements associated with the project. To be just to be clear, it is not subject to the master plan. The master plan is a policy document that guides the creation and amendment of the zoning ordinance and the subdivision and site plan regulations, but it in itself is not a regulatory document that the board can use to deny a project or approve a project for that matter. It is a frame of reference that the board can use, but it is not a regulation. With respect to the site plan regulations, there are some general purposes and specific purposes outlined. Sorry for the background here. Some general purposes and specific purposes outlined in the section Article 1 of the site plan regulations. Those are very generic statements. And the New Hampshire Supreme Court case from the Dartmouth versus Hanover project about 1.5 years ago. From that court case, it was made clear that the board cannot substitute those general purpose statements for the site plan regulations for the actual criteria and the specific regulatory requirements built into the site plan regulations. So again, you're being asked to evaluate whether the project complies with the specific requirements, design requirements of the site plan review regulations, not whether it complies with the master plan and not whether it complies with other sort of policy statements. So I just wanted to frame that. Tim, if you wanted to add anything to that, feel free.
I would just say that the general criteria set forth in the site plan review regulations aren't irrelevant, and David wasn't suggesting that they are, but there needs to be very specific evidence, fact-based evidence, if there isn't anything but fact-based evidence, to demonstrate that those general criteria are somehow not being met. And so the site plan review process can't be dependent upon personal opinion. It has to really be tagged to a specific requirement of the site plan review regulations, as David was suggesting, or perhaps the more general criteria come into play. But there needs to be very, very specific evidence that the board can rely on in making any determination above and beyond just personal opinion and conjecture.
All right. Any questions from the board? I'm going to ask the applicant. Unfortunately, I can't see you, so I don't know how numerous you are. I apologize for asking you to start this way, but if you're, would each of you, if you're more than one, please identify yourselves. And then I'll ask you to start your presentation.
This is Sue Reed. Jolynn Kish wishes to present, but she just got kicked out of the meeting for some reason. So I believe she's trying to get back into the meeting.
I see that she's gone, but I don't see her
She just sent me a
getting
text.
back in. Maybe she can try one more time.
Let's see, she's texting me again. Reloading. So she says she's reloading.
There she
Yeah.
is.
There she is.
Okay, good. Jolynn, I believe you're on. I'll turn myself back off.
And remember, there you go.
So muted, so I guess that's a good thing. All right, so the project that we have is, should I just go over like what was in the letter and from the beginning, or just a thumbnail view?
It's however you wish to present it. I think you're a little far from your microphone. It's a little bit difficult to hear you, but do you have any slides, or what were you?
So, how do I share my slides?
Jolene, if you have, this is Tim, if you have the slides up on your computer, you can share those slides by hovering towards the bottom middle of the Teams meeting screen. And then there is a arrow with inside a rectangle, and you can click on that, and it will give you options to share whatever screens you have open, and you just click on the screen that you'd like to share. If you have trouble, then I may have the materials that you wish to show, and I can show them myself.
Okay, I clicked. Is it sharing them or not?
We see your screen, but it's not. We're not seeing what you intend to show us. Sue had sent me some images earlier or late this afternoon. Is that what you'd like me to display, or no?
Well, right now my mouse is not doing anything, so I can't click on anything, and I can't turn myself on or oh, here it's back, sort of, maybe. Okay.
Yeah, this is David. It might be easiest, Jolynn, if Tim has what you want to show, it might be easiest for Tim to display it, and then you can just walk through it and talk through it.
Okay.
But only if he has what you want to show.
So this is Tim.
I can't see what
Okay, there we go. Okay.
So should I get out of what I have on my screen?
Well,
what you're looking at? Or
we can see it now. We can see a site layout.
Okay. So basically what we're talking about is that there is an existing building at 14 Bank Street and an existing building at 10 Bank Street. And we're planning to rebuild a new building where 14 Bank Street currently is in this location, and then keep 10 Bank Street, and then add the two sections in the back that we're calling 8 Bank Street. And in response to the comments that we have gotten from the board and the conceptual review and letters and such, we have shrunk the back building. It was a lot closer to both sides, actually, and it was one big building. So now the base of it is one big building, just the parking, but the two sections of it are designed to look like two separate buildings with different siding and window arrangements and stuff so that it has the appearance of two different buildings. And then if I can go to the next slide. So this one is showing the traffic flow of how to get in and out of the site. So there are these three driveways currently. So we're talking about using the driveway closest to 18 Bank Street and shifting it over so it doesn't straddle the property line, and using that to get into the upper level of the parking underneath 8 East and 8 West. And then we have one-way circulation going in and around 14 Bank Street. And then we're showing the entrance to the lower part of the parking under 8 East and West here. So that's the flow. We were asked to explain what some of the waiver requests were that we had. So I can go over those. I probably should go over those now because you were asking where those were. So one of them was about plantings along the perimeter. And we can put some plantings along the perimeter in these two shaded areas, but because they are driveways, we can't put as much plantings as you wanted along the perimeter. So we've taken all the plantings that would be there and put them in the center of the site. So that was one waiver area. The second waiver area was the 10-foot landscape buffer around the building. So we can have a 10-foot landscape buffer around all the buildings everywhere except this tiny little section here where it's 8 feet instead of 10 feet. And this little section where the two buildings are near each other. We can connect the buildings so it's not an issue, but we'd rather keep them separate and just have a smaller space between these two buildings. So that was the second waiver. And the third waiver was about lighting that spills off the property line. And this was in response to a request from the bike, I think it's called the Bike Ped Committee or something like that, but like a pedestrian committee that specifically asked for us to locate the lights in such a way that we would be illuminating the sidewalk and the areas approaching where the driveways are. So the waiver to have the light illuminate off the property line was in response to a request to have the light illuminate off the property line. So that's what those are demonstrating. And then, so here's what the landscape area looks like with the flow that we just talked about. So there's a lot of plantings along the Green Street side, a lot of internal plantings and areas for tenant use and recreation in the interior, and then the perimeter plantings around the buildings. And then these are just areas that are shaded for tenant use, just to point out that there are some places on site for the tenants to use. So that was kind of laying out how the site is arranged. The reason that we've done it this way is because we looked at a number of different arrangements for the site, and almost everything would require a lot of surface parking. And so if you put a lot of surface parking on the site, then you can have some buildings either across the front or across the back, but the majority of the lot becomes a parking lot. By doing it this way, we have 6 or so parking spaces that are exposed, and all of the parking is under the building. So it allows us to have some of these tenant areas and allows us to have this landscaping and try and keep more of the feel of the site that we have now. In terms of going over some of the specs, I think we went over these at the last meeting to just be clear about what's in the building and what's proposed. So we're talking about 10 Bank Street, which currently has 5 units in it, and 14 Bank Street, which currently has 3 apartments in it, and then an 8-room rooming house. One of those rooms has its own bathroom and the others share the 4 pieces of bathroom. There's no kitchen in the rooming house. And then we're talking about 10 Bank Street staying the same with the same 5 units in it. 14 Bank Street, which is this building, is a building with 6 2-bedroom apartments in it. And then 8 Bank Street, the agglomeration of the 2 buildings, is 24 2-bedroom units and 5 1-bedroom units. In terms of the parking inside here, I can try and open that file, maybe. Let me see how to share the next file. Do I have to click the share screen icon again or just pick a different file?
I'm not sure. David, do you know?
Yeah, I think you click share again and it brings up the options for you to choose from for the open windows that you have.
Try and open the next one. So right now you can't see anything on my desktop?
We can see the waiver number 3 diagram.
Okay, so even though I've closed it, you can still see it. All right. Doesn't really want to open the Teams window so I can click on anything.
Well, the one before was showing wasn't it showing the landscaping? And now we're looking at one that has a gray background. The white is the buildings outlined in black. And then the 3 yellow circles of the lighting that's along the sidewalk street.
Okay. Yeah, that was the 3rd one. So let's see if I can share a different file. Maybe. Okay. Well, I guess I can try and share the rendering because I can't. It doesn't let me pick the other file. Yeah, so it brought me back to the lighting one. So this is the one you were seeing before, right?
Correct.
No, that's another one. That's the one.
Okay. And then this was the lighting one. So did you see this landscape one? Did that come through?
Yeah,
Yes.
the landscape one did.
This one did. All right, but it doesn't let me. Oh, well, maybe let me show this one. All right.
Oh,
So
there you are.
okay, so here's one of the renderings of what the new 14 Bank Street looks like, with the 8 Bank Street in the background. And then what I was trying to get to is these other 2 diagrams in here. So this was the one that was just showing where all the parking is.
Right.
So inside the building, except these 2 spots over here and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots over here. So there's 7 spots outside. And this was just to show where the surface water collection areas are, but that's kind of technical, and if someone has a technical question, Dan is online to answer it. So then the next files are the pictures, the renderings, which I'll try and get to. Maybe. It might be, I'll try it, but it might be easier for Tim to share the renderings, but I'll see if I can pull them up.
Tim, do you have the renderings?
I have at my immediate disposal the documents that were provided this afternoon. Let me see if
They're the same pictures that we sent to you with the April 27th, or even before the last meeting, actually. They're the same renderings that we submitted. I'm just trying to pull them up so I can talk about a couple of the pictures, but if I can't.
I have renderings that are dated 4/13/20.
Correct.
Is that what we're looking for?
I think so, Tim.
Last meeting.
Okay, I will. Can you, Julian? Can you stop sharing your screen? I think you just click on that same share button.
Trying to get to the button to click, and it doesn't bring up the Teams window at all. So
All right, well, I'll share my screen and see if it overrides yours.
there.
Can everyone see that?
Yes, that's very helpful, Tim.
Thank you. So are you able to, so this was one that I thought I just showed. Can you go to the next one? So this is trying to give some idea of what it looks like with the, in the context of the building. So we've got the new 14 Bank Street next to the 18 Bank Street, and then 10 Bank Street is still there with 8 showing the parking going underneath, and then the library is to the right. Can you go to the next one? This is just to give some perspective as to where 8 Bank Street is relative to the other buildings. Next slide, please. And this is to point out that you can see 8 Bank Street a little bit above the post office, but you can't see it in the context of the library, even from coming around the green. It's kind of hidden, and there's another tree as well that the artist wasn't able to put in there, but it's pretty well hidden behind the post office. Next slide, please. Again, there's more trees than is in this picture, but it's meant to give some perspective as to what it would look like from Green Street. Next slide, please. And same here with the Green Street perspective. Someone had asked for some potential floor plans, but I don't think we need to show them at this point. There was some discussion about why are we getting rid of 14 Bank Street? The existing one, and why we're rebuilding it. And Jay Barrett, who's an expert at historical buildings, especially in our area, took a visit to the property, and I asked him to let us know what about the building could be reused, saved, repurposed, recycled, etc. And I don't know if he's available to comment on what he found and recommended that we do there, but if he's online, it would be worthwhile to hear what he had to say about that.
Are you online?
Jay, try to unmute yourself if you have a chance.
Yeah. How's that?
Excellent.
Okay. So I don't have a copy of the
Excuse me, just please introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah. Frank J. Barrett Jr., architect. I'm in my office in White River Junction. Fascinating to follow you on the screen. So I don't have a copy of the report in front of me. So, working from good memory, I did take an extensive look at the house. The house is, in a nutshell, there's very, very little of the original architectural character detailing left to the house. Most of it has been pretty well obliterated over the years through removal of things like a very gracious side porch, to vinyl siding, to changing of windows. Here and there, you can still see, you know, some remnant of the original house, but it's been pretty well obliterated, probably through the course of almost 80 odd years, I would guess, of just alterations and you know, and then more recently, absentee landlordism that has just, you know, really bled the property, to be brutally honest about it. You know, probably the most intriguing feature of the building that everyone comments on, architect and layperson alike, is the Palladian window in the upstairs second floor stair hall. That was a very intriguing piece to look at, and it's my really firm opinion that that piece came from an older house. Whether it had some significance to the original builder of the house and it was incorporated into it, but when you look at the glass, you look at the center piece of sash, you look at the side lights, and clearly, although it's in reasonably good condition and it's very interesting, it's a piece from an earlier building. You know, otherwise, the building, you know, was really nothing outstanding in its day. You know, it's a typical house of the period. And, you know, mechanically, structurally to a point, electrically, fire safety wise, you know, the building has been pretty well used over the years. I think there are other buildings on Bank Street that are far more worthy of preservation than this. This is probably one of the least contributing buildings on Bank Street, even though I realize we're not talking about a historic district per se. So as much as I like old buildings, there were very, very few pieces of this building left that, you know, I think deserve its preservation. And instead, I would just recommend that, you know, those pieces. I think it had a nice newel post and stair, and as I say, the Palladian window. Maybe those pieces get salvaged and reused somewhere else by somebody else. But the building is pretty well, you know, seen its life pass by.
Thank you for that. Anything further from the applicant?
I don't believe so, unless Sue thinks there's something.
Just not to get into discussions, but just to ask you, you framed the introduction as having taken the 8 Bank Street original design and made it into 2 buildings. I think, if I understand correctly, there are 2 buildings joined by a glass portion. And I was trying to find one of the renderings that shows that, and the only one that I could find is number G, which I think is a glimpse of that adjoining portion of the overall building. Is that correct?
It's basically like 2 sections that sit atop of one central parking garage, because the whole issue with trying to provide parking under the building is that it needs to be a certain size to be able to fit parking in a building. And so, kind of similar to the way the college built their buildings on South Street, there's parking under their whole block, but then there's individual looking buildings sitting on top. So we were trying to create the same thing, but in order to make sure that we preserve the handicap accessibility, we added a see-through connecting piece with just a walkway between the 2 sections, so that you could come up the elevator and still go across to the other side. And it also, for fire safety and so forth, it sort of provided the connectivity between the upper floors that was necessary. So we tried to make the middle section as transparent as possible, because it's only a hallway with a connection. And the only real connection is at the bottom, where the parking is contiguous underneath.
So that there's connection through this glass portion for all 3 floors.
For a hallway, correct.
Right. All right. Tim, I don't know if you could bring up number G of you had all of the renderings.
Yes, I can bring that back up.
It certainly doesn't show all of it. It's the only one that I could find that shows a portion of it.
And I can also bring up the architectural renderings from the plan set itself if you'd like to see those. But
They're
let
not
me
in color, but yes, maybe we'll do
correct.
both. Yeah.
G.
Yes. So there's just the tip. It's blocked by the adjoining building, but you can see that there's a separation between the two buildings, and you can glimpse what is apparently the glass hallway between those two floors. Is that correct?
That is correct. The glass connector between the central hallway of each wing of the building.
All right, thank you for that. Anything further from the applicant at this time before I turn it over for staff comments?
I think it's most efficient if we just respond to your questions.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. So Tim, may I turn it to you and Brian? Tim, did we lose you?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Mr. Chair, I do think it might be appropriate to ask the applicant to provide a little bit more information as part of their application. This is a complex project that involves proposed landscaping that the applicant could walk the site plan, the plan board through. There is a stormwater management system that, without getting into too much technical detail, might be, at least at a general, the planning board might benefit from a general overview provided by the applicant, talking about potential traffic impacts, any other potential impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. I mean, I think there's quite a bit more information that the applicant, I think it's incumbent upon the applicant to provide that information as part of their presentation. I think there's a lot here that has only been touched upon by the applicant. I'm happy to go into my staff comments, but that would be my recommendation.
So I heard 3 points. I don't know if there are more. We had landscaping, stormwater, and traffic.
Those are the 3 off the top of my head, but typically a project of this size and scope would engender or require a much more robust presentation from the applicant. It's not staff's job to walk, or the board's job to solicit every detail about the project. It should be given at the outset.
That's fine. I just don't know what level of detail you want. So I brought up the landscaping plan, but I didn't know how much you wanted to know about it. Sue is on and can talk about the landscaping plan, and Dan Nash is on and can talk about the traffic study that was done and the letter that was provided and his stormwater calculations and the report that he provided at whatever level of detail is appropriate. Should we start with Dan? Can you unmute yourself if you're here?
Sure, I'm here. I thought Sue did a nice job.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, this is Laurel Davis.
Yes.
Could I just ask a process question? Is this landscaping report and stormwater management report and traffic report, are they follow-ups to the staff requests that we received in our packet for this evening, or had they been done before?
This is Tim. I'm just simply suggesting that as part of the applicant's presentation, they should at least give an overview without bogging the board in detail as to the different aspects of the project, and just three of the key components that I thought of just off the top of my head were landscaping, traffic, talking about parking, going into the number of spaces provided, et cetera, as well as just a general overview of the stormwater management system. I think those are just a couple areas that were left, I think, relatively untouched during the applicant's initial presentation. And so it's not about updates. It's just about what is. I think it's just about what is being proposed. Period. What's being proposed.
All right, Sue or Dan?
Dan, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Sue did a colored exhibit that I think is probably the easiest to use to explain the site stormwater.
You want me to share that again?
Please. The 2-sheet exhibit set.
I'm looking for it. It's trying to open.
Joel, and this is Tim. Is it exhibit C1, or Dan, do you know C1 stormwater management? I can share my screen.
C1.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Is that what you're looking for, Dan?
Yes.
Okay.
The existing site is composed of 2 buildings and a mixture of paved and gravel parking lots. All of that runoff goes to the Bank Street stormwater system without any detention or treatment. In this project, when we're done, we'll have 3 buildings and 2 stormwater treatment and detention systems. The 8 Bank Street building will have a flat roof. And if you look on the site plans, there's a little RD, which means roof drain. The entire flat roof is internally drained and piped to the large blue shaded diagram, which is the large stormwater system. The parking lot, the surface parking lot, and half of the roof of 14 Bank Street drains to that system for treatment and detention. Over on the right side against the drive that's by the library, that's the drive to the lower garage. Half of 5 Bank Street, the lawn in front, and that driveway are captured in a catch basin down by the Bank Street sidewalk, and that water is put into the smaller treatment and detention system. So our new system will not increase the stormwater in any of the required storm events to the new system. And if we wanted to talk about parking, we can go to the C2 diagram, the next one in that set, Tim.
Dan, sorry, it's Bruce. What do you mean by treatment?
The underground system I have is like a septic system, but it's used for stormwater. The stormwater percolating through the soil gets some treatment. In this case, we have very little contaminants that will be introduced to those systems because we don't have large surface parking lots. Most of the runoff for the large system will be contributed by the roof, which is essentially rainwater. So it's a volumetric issue. You're just trying to slow down the rate of flow. Driveway on the right-hand side or the library is a very small area, and it's pre-treated by a catch basin that captures heavy sediment. We have an isolator row in the recharge system that traps more sediment than between the rows of chambers. They continue to filter the water and recharge it to the ground.
So will this reduce the amount of water that the city currently has to deal with? Because
Yes.
it's going to the ground?
There's a reduction. Yep.
All right, thanks for that, Dan.
I have a question.
Yes, Joan?
This is Joan. I definitely remember reading, and I don't know if it was our materials for tonight or the materials for the time before that, where the question was asked that, and perhaps it was just answered, but it wasn't clear to me, that the runoff that would come from the driveway and then the parking goes into these blue shaded areas, but it's only treated by soil. There's nothing else that's treating that runoff. And does that just 100% goes to recharge groundwater, or does that hook into the sewer system?
It just gets filtered by the soil and gets recharged to groundwater. We're not allowed to discharge rain runoff to the city sewer system.
Okay. Now, what about the like when cars drive into the garage and they're dripping from having been in the rain, or they're dripping from being parked somewhere during the day, perhaps where they were covered with snow? What about the rain drip from the roads and the snow drip from the cars in the garage? Where does that get treated, and where does that go?
Yes, that gets treated. The quantity of flow that you're speaking of is extremely small. In the area by the in between 8 Bank Street and 14 Bank Street, you'll note I think it's symbolized with GT, which is a grit oil separator. The garage runoff is not rain runoff. It's just like you said, anything that might drip off of the cars has to go through that grit oil separator, and then it goes to the city sewer system for treatment. So garage runoff is treated differently than outside stormwater runoff.
Okay, thank you. We also had in our packet questions about the rain gardens and where they were located. Would you address those questions? Are you familiar with those questions that were in our packet about asking?
Yes. That term was used loosely. There's 3 little green areas on this diagram that's up on the screen that are on the back side of 8 Bank Street.
Yeah.
They're really not rain gardens in the normal sense of the word. Other designers, when you have a site where you can't get detention ponds or recharge, they use rain gardens, which provide the treatment and detention. In this case, these are just natural areas that I called rain gardens that should naturally absorb the runoff, but I've added a drainage feature, which is some pipe that will assist the areas in recharging to groundwater if there's any excessive flow, so that we don't have any runoff towards the neighbors.
Okay. And I have a question. Looking at the landscape plan, I have questions both in the type, and I know this is not your area, but it's related, and whoever feels they can answer, obviously. But looking at the type of plantings that are indicated for going along the southern property boundary, I mean the southern property between the building and the boundary line, which it is a little confusing to me. So this is a question for Jolene, or Jolyn, sorry, I mispronounced your name. I'll say Ms. Kish. That was, I'm reading different versions, and some say that it's going to be 15 feet from the back of the building to the property line, and other things have said 10, and other things have said 8. So where does the back of the building stand right now from the property line? The southern.
15 feet from the property line.
15 feet from the property line. Okay. Yeah. I have a lot of concerns about the landscaping there, and that I really don't feel that that's enough space to be taking the number of trees that are scheduled to go there and the types of trees that are scheduled to go there, especially taking into account that underneath or alongside of or in between these trees are those, the drainage pseudo rain gardens that Mr. Nash was just telling us about. I try to visualize what this would be in my own yard, and we have some drains in our property, and they get filled up with dirt, and they stop doing their job of draining. These are under the surface drains, so they have to be we have to periodically dig them up, clear them out, and then replace them. So that's one of my concerns, is how would this, I kind of can't believe that small area could support that number of trees. Yes, when they're originally planted, because when they're originally planted, they'll really be very tiny. But if it's a good spot and the goal is to have them be a certain size to be a proper buffer, I don't see how those trees will be happy there. And I don't see how you'll deal with that, that pseudo rain garden.
I guess,
Dan, you have any comments on that?
The area is essentially a natural area. The pipes that I've put in are a supplemental feature. It's like belt and suspenders. Those areas could probably just be a depression like Joan mentioned, and not have any pipe and just have some routine maintenance to get sediment out that causes them to not drain. But the purpose of putting the pipes in there is in case we get an excessive amount of sediment or leaves that block the soil from infiltrating, the water will rise up to a level and go into those rise pipes. In my calculations, I've shortened those pipes to where each one is only 10 feet long overall length, so it doesn't interfere with the soil. That soil behind the building can be treated just exactly like a natural area, as if those pipe features or the word rain garden wasn't even mentioned, because it's just simply a landscape area with a slight depression to keep rainwater off of neighbors' property.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. This is Laurel Stavis.
Yes, Laurel.
We had some conversation in previous presentations about the water table and how the applicant had done some initial test sites on that water table, and the city wanted the applicant's engineer to provide estimates of seasonal high water table drainage. Have those been conducted?
The tests have been conducted. The calculation has not been.
I think we'll get to that, Laurel, when we get to Brian. So, Dan, if I could ask you to continue, could you talk about parking?
Certainly. If we could go to the next diagram, Tim, C2.
Did we lose Tim?
Yes, this is David Brooks stepping in for Tim for a moment. Dan, which sheet are you looking for?
It was one of the exhibits. It wasn't the sheet in my plan set. Sue submitted some talking point sheets. There was a set of 6 and a set of 2. We just went over the exhibit entitled C1 Stormwater Management. I need the next one in that set of 2, called parking diagram.
Hey, Dan, this is Tim. Sorry. What can I help you with?
We need the exhibit C2, not sheet C2.
Okay.
Please.
Yep. go. C1. Is C2 something I would have gotten today?
I'm not sure when
lit-
Sue submitted those.
We took it down. It's in the same file next to the stormwater management one. It's the only other thing in there. Yeah, it's that yellow, the yellow
Oh.
part.
Oh,
Yep.
I'm sorry. Okay,
Yep.
That's it right there.
sorry.
According to the site plan regulations, there's no specific parking requirements for a project. The planning board determines the parking requirements for given projects. What we did to try to assist the board in its determination of what the required parking would be is to show a couple methodologies for calculating parking that we put on the cover sheet of our plan set. But we have 2 levels of garage parking and a small area of surface parking for visitors, vendors, and so on. Most projects require as much floor area or building area for parking as you do for building. So in this case, we've been able to structure that parking, which is more than 5 times as expensive as surface parking. And it also decreases surface runoff. So I think there's a great benefit in utilizing the proposal that Jolynn Kish has proposed here.
Okay, thank you for that, Dan. Any comments, questions from board members? We have Dan online.
We didn't
Hello.
hear anything about
Yes.
traffic.
No, I was going to get to that, so just on parking.
This is, hello, Mr. Chairman, this is Gregorio. I got a question about parking.
Please go ahead, Gregorio.
Okay, so, and this is to whoever can answer it there. The parking, the underground parking, how is that interior parking space going to be ventilated? I ask this question because there's going to be a lot of carbon monoxide under there, and there's going to be idling engines. There's going to be noise as well. So I just want to know more about that because no one has addressed that so far. I'd like to know what the thinking is behind that.
Thank you, Gregorio. Dan?
That's a building permit issue. It's not a site plan issue. The building permit review process, the building inspector gets into the details of air handling and air quality inside the building.
I understand that, but the reason I ask it is because it will impact the exterior if it's being ventilated out. So the neighbors and whoever's around it will be impacted by it.
To answer your question, I don't believe they've impacted by it any different than if it were surface parking. And it is planned to have windows in the garage so that you need a lot of mechanical ventilation. So it wouldn't be a concentrated exhaust or any kind of fumes in any particular location because it should vent very much like a surface parking situation. So it's not really accurate to call it underground parking. It's under building parking, but it's not exactly underground parking because it goes into the slope of the land a little bit, but it's open enough to be able to drive in. So there's a good bit of window surface area to allow for that ventilation. That help?
Yeah, it helps. I haven't seen a rendering that shows what you're describing. Do you have something like that you can show us?
I think the perspective that we had showing the ramps going into the building, show you where some of the windows are. the first, like this one, for example, if you look at where the car is entering the building and you look to the left, there's a door. And if you look to the left some more, you'll see a window. That's a window for that level of parking. So it's really not as blocked off as from ventilation as you think. And then above it, level of parking. And so all those windows above are the other level of the parking garage. There's a lower parking and an upper parking. So I don't know if the next slide shows the very first picture, the first one on the left. Yeah, that one. Oh. Yeah, a little more. Yeah, that shows entering the upper level of the parking. So there's a kind of a little bit of a retaining wall where that tree is. But most of that area is open again, and then the windows right behind the tree, between the yellow and the gray. That's also a window for the garage.
I see.
Yeah.
When you say windows, are these openable? Are they partially open? What's the thought there?
There's no glass in the window. They're window openings.
Jolynn, this is Jay Barrett. If I might, jump in. As Dan said, on one hand, it's a building code question, and the building codes are very, very strict as to when is mechanical ventilation required in a garage within a building like this, and when is it not? And it's based upon a percentage of exterior openings. Now, I think that some of this, when you get into the details, some of it will be able to be met by just natural ventilation. On the other hand, if there is mechanical ventilation that the building code will require, then it's not just a matter of putting some fans in the wall and dumping it out onto the adjacent land area. It would need to be properly ducted so that it's not, just, obnoxious fumes being exhausted from the building. I mean, the building code is very, very clear and very strict on this matter for the reasons that I think the chair, articulated.
It sounds to me like we'll come back to that issue. So Dan, could I at this point ask you to talk about traffic?
Was discussed briefly during the presentation, the site has 3 existing driveways. We'll continue to use them. As you're facing the site, the driveway on the left will be an entry only. The one in the middle will be an entry just an exit. And the one on the right will be entry and exit for the lower level of the parking garage. We have done an auto turn diagram for the fire department to show that their fire vehicle can maneuver through the parking lots. So it has been asked why the driveway in the left is still 2 lanes wide, and we need that width for the fire truck to be able to basically go into what would be normally an opposing lane to be able to swing and make those corners to go through our small parking lot, come around 14 Bank Street and exit the site.
Okay, and could you talk to traffic in the sense of, traffic, the study that was submitted, the number of entrances, exits, and that sort of thing?
I don't have the report in front of me, but we were below the threshold that requires a full traffic study. So I believe that the traffic impact will not present an inordinate burden on any of the city's traffic infrastructure.
Mr. Chair, this is Laurel Davis. I have a question.
Please, Laurel.
So you're talking about adding, I don't know, close to 50 new units of housing. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes,
And you're saying that your peak hour trips will only increase by 6? How is that mathematically possible?
that's what the calculations show. Not all 50 units move at the same time. People come in on either side of the peak, and there are existing housing units there now. So this is the net increase that we would have.
And we're talking about 40 units, not 50 total.
This might be an older study then.
Yeah, looks like that's an older letter. I thought we had an updated one, but
Because it says 22 existing units and actually there are only 9.
more than 9, but even
No,
so.
9.
Okay, well,
4 plus 5.
there's more than 4 there because the rooming house has effectively like little studio apartments that don't have kitchens. Because some of them have, at least one of them has its own bathroom, and then there's 4 different bathroom sections for the other people. So
None of them has kitchens. They're not really units. But anyway, it's at least 4 times as big as it was before.
okay, well, it's 40 units total. So the increase in the number of units, however you want to calculate it, would be not really you want to calculate it either way. That doesn't trigger enough additional traffic. It's not as big. I mean, it's a bigger building than what's there, but it's not substantially big enough to generate a whole lot of traffic.
Chair, I have a question.
Who's that?
Kathy?
Yes, Kathy.
One of the concerns that I had looking at this was, I'm assuming that the majority of people who leave that development in the morning especially will be trying to turn left onto Bank Street from 2 driveways that are right next to each other. And I'm wondering, what the requirements are to figure out what kind of impact that'll have on Bank Street traffic, going, what would that be, east and west?
We don't anticipate any hazard from that turning traffic. The volume is not that big.
So I think we're all struggling with the number of parking spaces. Could you explain why you basically need over 2 parking spaces per apartment?
I'll let Jolynn explain that.
We're aiming to have 1 parking space per bedroom, but we don't quite have that, I don't believe. But you need to have enough parking for visitors, for delivery people. I mean, we're trying to make sure we keep all of the parking for these units not in the city streets, so that people still have the public parking available to go to restaurants and do other things. So we're trying to keep all the parking on the site for whatever's needed for people coming and going.
So will parking A be part of the rental price and B will be assigned?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes, who's that, Kathy?
Kathy. I recall last year when the city council changed the requirements for the number of unrelated people who could be rented to per unit, that Ms. Kish was one of the people who spoke very strongly, who lobbied for that increase in unrelated. So with 24 2-bedroom apartments, is she anticipating putting 4 people in each one? I mean, then we have more cars maybe than we're anticipating.
I think if you recall, when I spoke at that meeting, I mentioned that that was a concern for a lot of people, but it isn't something that our company as company policy allows. So we have an occupancy limit of 1 person per bedroom. So if it's a 2-bedroom apartment, it would have 2 adults in it and however many kids, but it would have 2 adults in it. So our company policy is not going to change when we build 1 new building because we manage 600 tenants and the policy needs to be consistent.
Chair, this is Tom Martz.
Yes, Tom.
I also have a question. It's kind of related to traffic, but it's related to traffic and that is related to the fire department, and that is, I'm having a hard time looking at the schematics of this building, understanding where the central hallway is going to be. Will there be apartments to the front of the building and apartments to the back of the building? And if there are apartments to the back of the building, what happens if a fire breaks out in that building? How do the fire people, the fire persons, how do they effectively evacuate people from the upper floors of the back side of the building if there is no way for the trucks to get to the back of the building?
May I speak to this? This is Sue Reed.
Yes, Sue.
Hi, my name is Sue Reed. I work for Jolynn as her architect. Could I have any one of the floor diagrams up?
Jim, do you have those?
Yeah, anyone. No, I didn't mean floor plans. I meant just one of the site plan diagrams. Sorry about that. So we'll get one of them eventually.
I have too much of.
There, no, that's fine.
Okay. All right, hold on.
We're all struggling with this.
We are.
Okay. So the easy case is 14 Bank Street. So you can see on 14 Bank Street, there's an apartment on each side of the center hallway. There's 1 stairway. You can come in and go from the front door and the back door. So that's super simple. 10 Bank Street is existing, so that has a number of exits on it. 8 Bank Street, it has a very typical layout for apartment buildings, which has a center hallway going end to end the length of the building. And then there's 2 stair towers that come out on the Bank Street side. So those are the two exit stairs. So you don't go out the south side of the building to exit, you go out the north side, which is served by the driveways.
Okay, this is Tom Martz again. I understand that. I understand. What happens if those stairways, if the front of the building is blocked off for people who are in the apartments on the back side? How do they escape the fire if a fire truck with a ladder can't get down the back side of the building?
So the first line of defense for fire is, of course, the fire alarms. Then you've got the sprinkler system. It's a fully sprinklered building. Then there's 2 exits you can get to. I think you will find that most apartment buildings don't have fire lanes on both sides. This is not an unusual layout to have them on just one side.
This is Dan Nash. If I may speak up.
Please, Dan.
One of our former deputy fire chiefs, a fellow named Bob Fitz, had a mantra that he drilled into my head when I was a city employee. The mantra was, there has never been a multiple loss of life in a properly sprinkled building in the United States. So the properly sprinkled building, the function is to knock down the smoke and heat and let people get out of the building safely. They're not to put out the fire and protect property as many people think. The purpose of sprinklers is to allow people to exit the building safely until the firefighters can get there and finish fighting the fire.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Chair, this is Laurel Stavis.
Yes, Laurel.
And Tom, please pardon me if I'm not paraphrasing your question correctly, but I thought that you were asking about fire truck access to the back of the building?
That is correct. That's what I was asking.
None of the responses thus far have addressed that question.
It's not a common thing to have access all the way around a building for a fire truck, especially a sprinkled building. So I'm not sure where that request is coming from, but the majority of apartment buildings don't have access all the way around the building. I mean, a shopping center might have access around the building for deliveries and so forth, but most apartment buildings don't have a way to bring a fire truck all the way around the building.
If I might jump in again, Jay Barrett, architect who's with this project as well. You know, the state building codes are extremely sophisticated and take this into consideration. That is, how much access do you have around the building? What type of construction is the building? How much frontage do you have? And, you know, is the building sprinkled or not? Other fire rating issues, that determines in part how much access is required by building code around the building. There is rarely ever does the building code require complete access around the building. And I think the only time that I've been involved in a project, and I've been at this for 45 plus years now, was in 1986 with large additions to split ball bearing when I was a much younger architect and the building codes were much simpler. And in that case, because of the occupancy, because of the size of the building, the hazard level, et cetera, that building, when it was expanded significantly in 1986, did have a fire lane all the way around it. I think that's probably one of the few buildings in Lebanon that clearly has a fire lane all the way around it. So, you know, this is an important issue that you raise. But, you know, there are subsequent layers of building code analysis that this project will need to go through by the designers prior to it being formally submitted for a building permit. And that is a very big issue that will be looked at. But there is, given the occupancy of the building, the size of the building, et cetera, I can say this much, that there's nothing in the building code, the state building code, or even as it's modified by the city of Lebanon, that requires a fire access on all four sides of this building.
Right, but in ours, you're asking for a waiver of section 6.5 B.5. Minimum access requirements shall include a 50-foot turning radius and a 22-foot fire lane at the rear of the building, which you're asking for a waiver on something that we have in our planning documents as a requirement.
You're saying your planning documents require fire access around the full perimeter of the building?
According to what I'm reading with your waiver request, which you have yourself submitted, the minimum access requirement shall include a 50-foot turning radius and a 22-foot fire lane at the rear of the building. You're asking for a waiver of that, and so we have to make a judgment whether that's an appropriate thing for us to waive.
Well, I think maybe what's happened, you know, if I'm following the sequence here, is that there might be sort of a collision between the requirements of the planning documents versus the requirements of the state building and fire codes.
We did have this discussion once before, and we were told to put the waiver in there. But when we had the discussion, the fire department person was surprised that that was even in the regulation. And I'm trying to remember which person that was, but they said that what they required was what Dan Nash calculated out for the turning radius and that one-way loop around 14 Bank Street. And that's, having met with them, that's what they requested for the building.
Well, certainly a turning radius for a piece of firefighting apparatus, that's a different issue than, building perimeter for access.
And he said he didn't realize that that was even in there because he was not expecting any building perimeter access. And
Right.
that was from the fire department.
Yeah. I mean, clearly an integral part of, site plan review is the ability for fire or rescue to be able to approach a building and to be able to turn equipment and get it out. But that's a different issue than access around the building for firefighting purposes.
I'm going to step in at this point. Tom, I think that there's a little bit of confusion, and seeing that we're not going to complete this discussion this evening, we'll use the time between now and the next meeting to clarify what you're addressing, which is very important. But I do note that we're well over an hour already, and I do want to give the public the opportunity to speak. So now I'm going to turn to Tim and Brian to go through staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Tim. Excuse me. Just wanted to point out that I did receive a couple questions about finding material online. There has been a large amount of submissions over time regarding this application. Everything that has been submitted to the planning board, and those things are typically provided as with an agenda packet. As part of the agenda packet, all of those materials are available online. There's no perhaps easy way of finding them. What I would recommend to anyone who wants to review anything that has been submitted to the planning board in connection to with this project, you can refer to the staff memo for tonight's meeting, which provides links to all of the agenda packets that have been provided in connection with this application. And again, all of the material that has been provided to the planning board can be found at those links. There has been some new materials that have been submitted since the agenda packet for tonight's meeting was posted last week. Those new materials were, I believe they were primarily in response to some outstanding technical comments that the city engineer had. We have not had an opportunity to review those in detail yet, but we will do so prior to the next meeting, and those materials will be provided in the next meeting agenda packet. I will just touch on a couple points in the staff memo that was prepared for tonight. Going to page 4 of the memo under waiver requests. The waiver request from section 62B1, section 62B1 does require perimeter landscaping of 15 feet in width. There is an exception that says within the central business district, it is not required where proposed development of the site does not allow. I think there's some room for interpretation there. I think for a good portion of the site, the applicant is providing that 15-foot perimeter buffer as required, but to the extent that buffer is not provided, I think it's a matter of interpretation for the planning board at the outset as to whether or not that requirement applies and how it applies to this project, given that exception that's contained within 62B1. So that might be a point of discussion. Perhaps, in other words, the applicant has complied with that section based on the language accepting the requirement from being complied with, where the proposed development of the site does not allow in the central business district. Section 6.2D, the applicant has requested a waiver from providing at least it's a partial waiver from requiring or providing a 10-foot wide landscaping strip, if you will, around each of the buildings. The applicant had shown an exhibit highlighting 2 areas at the front of the proposed 8 Bank Street building where that buffer is not satisfied, where that 10-foot landscaping strip is not satisfied, including one area between the existing 10 Bank Street building and the proposed 8 Bank Street building, where I believe the separation distance between those buildings will be about 2.5 feet. But I do think that there are other areas on that the board should be aware of, that there are other areas on the site where that 10-foot landscaping around each building is not provided. And I would suggest that those would include the sides and rear of the 10 Bank Street building, and along the sides of 14 Bank Street, and then along other portions of the front of 8 Bank Street building. I suspect that the applicant is relying on the language of the regulations in determining that the areas that I just referenced are compliant with section 6.2D1, because of an exception that's set forth in 6.2D2, which provides that as part of the landscape design, functional features, and then in parentheses, such as patios, entrance walks, and loading areas that cross through the landscaped area to the building, may be permitted if they are necessary for the normal functioning of the building. I interpret that language to not include driveways. Driveways are essential to the operation of the site in general, but not necessarily specific to the building itself. And certainly driveways are an obvious feature of site design, and could have easily been included within the list of functional features delineated in section 6.2 D2, and it's not. So, but that too is a matter of interpretation, perhaps for the planning board to determine. It's staff's view that the partial waiver request is needed for several more areas in addition to what the applicant has identified. But again, that is up to the planning board from an interpretation standpoint. The applicant identified the waiver required from section 672B to provide lighting intensity that exceeds 0.5 foot candles at grade level at the front of the lot. And as Mr. Martz brought up just now, there is a waiver that's required from section 65B5 of the site plan review regulations that does require or does provide that minimum access requirements shall include a 50-foot turning radius and 22-foot fire lanes at the rear of the buildings. And Ms. Kish's memory is accurate in terms of the fire department plan reviewer not even necessarily being aware that requirement was in the site plan review regulations. It's something that's been brought to our attention recently, and just in reviewing our site plan review regulations for things that we may have overlooked in the past. And this is one of those regulations, and it's been on the waiver request list for several projects that have come before the planning board recently. And so perhaps, as Mr. Barrett suggested, the site plan review regulations lag what are now the standard requirements in the state building code and otherwise. I do want to point out, for the benefit more for the audience than for the planning board, that just because a waiver is granted does not relieve the applicant of providing whatever it is that they're showing on their site plan. So for the most part, these are partial waiver requests. They're partially being satisfied, and to the extent that they are being satisfied as shown on the site plan that's before you tonight, the applicant will have to make those improvements. So it doesn't let them off the hook entirely. They still have to construct what it is that they're proposing to construct or install. I just wanted to point out, I'm now on page 5, the staff memo under 6.2 landscaping standards. The applicant has worked with staff to address substantially all of the comments that we've had so far through several iterations of the plan. As Ms. Monroe pointed out, we did have a concern about the interaction or the compatibility between the proposed landscaping, particularly the trees and their root systems at the rear of the 8 Bank Street building, with the what we're sort of informally calling rain gardens, the drainage features, and it appears that Mr. Nash doesn't think there will be a conflict. So perhaps that concern has been satisfactorily addressed. Moving on to page 6, there is a requirement in the site plan review regulations that that a multifamily development make adequate provisions for the on-site recreational needs of the residents of the proposed development. And I think there was a slide to that effect. I think that was shown tonight and discussed by Ms. Reed to a certain extent. There are some open areas in seating areas within the site to meet that technical requirement and the needs of the residents. The application also, or the site plan also indicates that there will be 27 indoor bike spaces provided. We just think that we would recommend that those spaces be more clearly identified, the location of the spaces be more clearly identified in the garage. There's sort of a marker, a note marker indicating where they generally will be located, but we think they should be specifically laid out. Moving to stormwater management, I thank Mr. Nash for walking us through that. I found that to be very helpful. I hope the board did as well. There were some outstanding technical comments that the city engineer has. We've provided those to the applicant. I believe they've responded to those, but we haven't had a chance to review their response. So it's possible that that those any outstanding concerns that the city engineer have been resolved, but we'll be able to provide more detail on that at the next meeting. So we continue to work with the applicant and have no doubt that we can resolve everything prior to prior to the planning board making a decision on the application. The sort of jumping around a little bit, section 6.7 of the site plan review regulations sets forth the regulations for lighting. Just curious whether the board has taken a look at the proposed lighting fixtures for the lighting along the front of the property and maybe consider whether those those are appropriate for appropriate design given the character of the Bank Street neighborhood. If you haven't taken a look at that, I encourage you to, and maybe it's a point of discussion for a future meeting. Just jumping down to the zoning regulations, as I believe has already been mentioned, there is no maximum density requirement per se in the central business district. And on that note, I think probably everyone's aware of this, but this area, downtown Lebanon, was zoned central business district, and in January of this year, the council adopted an amendment to the zoning map and to the zoning ordinance to rezone every property that was zoned central business district downtown to our new Lebanon downtown district, and at the same time, the planning board adopted specific design regulations for site and building design regulations for properties and developments within the new Lebanon downtown district. But because this application was submitted prior to the adoption of the Lebanon downtown district regulations, it is still subject to the old, if you will, the old central business district zoning regulations, and is not subject to the new Lebanon downtown district design regulations set forth in section 6.10 of the site plan review regulations. So density is determined for developments in the central business district and now also in the Lebanon downtown district based on site-specific conditions and site-specific factors such as the availability of parking and or the ability to provide required parking, the availability of adequate water and sewer, and the ability to provide required site improvements and to meet all of the requirements of the site plan review regulation. So it's within the jurisdiction of the planning board to determine whether the density is appropriate, but it does need to relate to one of the factors that are set forth in section the central business district regulations in the zoning ordinance. Just wanted to point out that the applicant is as has been discussed, the applicant is providing approximately 2.1 parking spaces per unit. But we would note that this parking structure is exactly the type of parking that the regulations are encouraging and would like to see in as part of our downtown development, especially our downtown development, but in general. And so I think I think the applicant should be applauded for undertaking what is an extraordinarily expensive, structure to build. And again, so from staff's point of view, the fact that there are 2.1 parking spaces per unit is not is sort of immaterial in the sense that they will be located within a 2-story parking structure, almost every single space except for 7. The zoning regulations, for example.
I would like to interrupt, Chair. May I interrupt with a comment?
Let's come back to it, Joan. Let's let him finish off.
It is pertinent to the discussion that we are being subjected to. But I can wait.
I'll get to you as soon as he finishes his comments.
Thank you.
Tim?
I'm actually done. I don't know, Brian, if you had anything else.
Chair, this is Brian. Can you hear me?
Speak a little louder, Brian, please.
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I have gotten some new materials as of Friday for review, and I've been through those at least as on a cursory review, not in detail. And I have a handful of things that still need to be addressed, and the applicant is still pending some delivery of answers to a couple of questions. So that's the status of the technical review right now. And those are, I believe, Tim, those are in the package, but I don't know, maybe they're not.
Correct. They are.
Okay.
Excuse me, in which package? Not the package that we received for tonight's meeting. If you got something on Friday, there's no way that it was in a package that we see.
I'm sorry, Brian, were you referring to the comments that you had that we had delivered to the applicant? Maybe I misunderstood you.
Yeah, let me see if I can get a date here. The comments made May 25th.
All right, so those are not in the package. Those are too recent.
Okay.
For us.
So we'll get those in the next package.
Wasn't the 25th yesterday? Wasn't that Memorial Day?
Right. So it's too recent. So we don't have those.
You only have what we received prior to preparing the agenda packet and posting it online.
Right. All right. So more to come for the next meeting. Anything further, Brian?
I would just point out that if there are further questions on the traffic, the applicant has provided a trip generation memo, which details their projected traffic generation after construction of the project. But the board has the ability, if they so choose, to ask for more information. But the regulations don't actually call for that, with the exception of the board having the right to ask for it. And that's under 5.1.G.2. So keep that in mind as you review further comments and questions relative to traffic.
All right, good point. All right, so we started this review at 7:06. It's now 8:38. I desperately want to get to the public. I don't know how many people wish to speak. So Joan, you had something that you wanted to say, and then I'm going to ask the board if they have something that they need to discuss tonight. Otherwise, I want to get to the public.
Okay, this is Monroe. Yes. I do very much want to get to the public. And I also feel that we, the board, have not been given enough time this evening to continue with our questions, which I am very annoyed about. I feel like we've been given information that we had written for us. I don't feel we needed to have it given to us verbally again. I think what's really important is that we need to have more time to toss back and forth. We've received so much information from so many meetings. It's very hard to keep it straight. That's where I would like to have help. And I definitely want to get to hearing the public. by my records, we haven't heard from the public since 2019. Oh, meaning at a meeting. We have received emails and we have received letters, but we have not received comment during a meeting since 2019. And I think that that's not acceptable. That's too long a gap for the public to have, because the public can also make comments on questions that we've had during the meeting and answers that we've gotten during the meeting. But I'll be quiet now so we can get to the public.
So you said that you had an intervention on something that Tim was talking about. No? Clearly, we're not going to finish our debate tonight. We're just getting going.
I would like to hear from the public.
All right. Does any other board member have anything that they want before I move to the public?
Chair, this is Kathy. I have just one question.
Yes, Kathy.
This is to clarify a letter that came from someone in the public. What kind of heating and or air conditioning systems are anticipated for this building? Are they the building as a whole, individual units provided by the tenants or the landlord? This had to do with the noise question.
Dan, can you answer that? Or someone else on the applicant side?
We're looking at mini split technology for delivering heating and cooling. So we're still in the design phases of that, because that's definitely part of the building permit discussion. And so we didn't get much more detail than that, but what we're working on is a mini split system, which would be individually controlled by each apartment.
And then those would be ground placements behind the building, or what?
Well, if there's any equipment that isn't inside the building, it would be on the roof.
Thank you.
All right, so this is public meeting. It's also a public hearing, and so I'm now going to open this portion of our discussion to the public. This is a little tricky. Normally in-person meetings, I can see where people in the public are seated, and I can ask people to approach a microphone. I will ask people to signal that you wish to speak. Hopefully we don't have multiple people at the same time, and I'll try to handle this as best I can. I would ask people who have not commented in writing, unless you have something to add to what you've previously submitted, and particularly abutters. So who do we have from the public?
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, this is Carolyn Cole, and I own 18 Bank Street, and I would venture to guess that I probably am one of the most, if not the most, impacted properties on this, being right next to the property. I look out my window right now to what is 14 Bank Street. I own the beautiful Victorian with the turret, so to orient the rest of the public. And I'm very much in favor of this project. I think the application is well thought out, and I think it's very considerate to my needs as a neighbor. I think the size and scope, while I understand some people find it kind of big in the back, it doesn't really offend me, because I look at the Ava every single day. I look out my window and I see it, and it's a beautiful structure. And this is not as big as Ava, but it's in the same architectural lineage as that. 14 Bank Street has had a lot of discussion about its historic nature. And I mean, I can tell you what it's like living next to it. It's a property that is visited often by police and ambulances. It is in kind of rough shape, and that's being kind. And I'm really impressed by I had not seen the yellow building, the proposed building, until tonight, and I was really pleased by it. I think it's rather beautiful and very much in keeping with the architecture of the neighborhood. I I also think that Lebanon is a really awesome place to live. And with the downtown revitalization and Lucky's coffee shop and everything else, it will be great to have a lot of young new faces come to the center of the city and be able to walk to all the establishments and, you know, just contribute to the economy of the place. I hope and think that this will increase property values enormously, especially mine. And I couldn't be more happy with it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Who else?
My name is Robert Green. I'm a resident of Lebanon.
Yes, Mr. Green. Are you in a butter?
No, I'm not. I was pausing in case somebody wanted to jump in.
No, I didn't hear anyone else, so please go ahead.
Thank you.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Joan Monroe. I forgot. We usually ask people to identify themselves, first name and last name, and then also tell us just roughly whether they are in a butter or they live in the neighborhood or which ward they live in. So I'm sorry to interrupt. We should have asked that of Carolyn Coe. She did tell us that I think she owned it, but she didn't tell us where she lives. Thank you.
I'm sorry, let me just really rephrase. My office is 18 Bank Street, and I thought I was clear that I own the yellow and brown Victorian building right across from 14 Bank Street.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Green, which ward are you in?
I live at 21 Spencer Street. So
Right,
just a
thank
couple
you.
blocks off the green. Thank you. I have a couple of concerns. To be brief, the building seems quite tall. The photograph from what looked like in front of the Upper Valley Music Center towards the post office, I can see why it was taken the way it was taken, but it seems like a wide angle view, and I think it may underestimate the impact on the skyline from Coburn Park. And it's a very modern style building as opposed to the colonial post office, et cetera. My other comment was related to affordability. In the cover letter, there was a discussion about affordability, and I am interested if the developer has made a commitment about affordability. Thank you.
All right, we'll take note of that and come back to that at our next deliberation. Someone else from the public.
Mr. Sheriff.
If nobody else is going to
Oh.
step in, may I
I'd
step
like
in?
to speak, but I don't know how to. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay,
Please
I'm in
identify
a
yourself.
butter in the back. I'm on Green Street, 14 Green Street.
And your name is?
I'm Doreen Schweizer, 14 Green Street. I abut directly behind.
Thank you.
I wish I was just looking for the letter I sent in. I wrote a number of things. One of the things I'm concerned about that's been addressed tonight, I guess, is the drainage. I've never had any drainage issues on my property, and I guess they're saying I won't. I was out walking today, and I walked past Whitman Press, and I looked at that building, and I saw how big it is, and I saw it's about the same size as this building that is going to loom behind our neighbors. If you look at it from the Green Street side, as the man just said, these are wide angle lenses. They're going to be looming. I mean, I appreciate the woman at 18 Bank or whatever number it was who's next door and appreciating the front building. I think you did a great job in the front building and making it look like it fits in. And I wonder why you can't do that in the back. I just feel that there's an issue here in that the land abuts residential. So yeah, it's all fine for the area it's in, but it's going to totally change Green Street. And everybody I speak to on my block, even though I'm the abutter here, everybody can see it out their back window. And it is a monolith. It's to me, it's not a beautiful thing. It looks a little bit like what we sometimes call Soviet architecture. Why couldn't, if you're going to build a building back there, why couldn't it also be in keeping with Green Street? I mean, the woman at 18 Bank Street that looks out to this front building, she doesn't look out to the back building. I'm also concerned, just as a non-knowing about these things person, about the fact that there's going to be 77 parking places. Most of those people are going to work 9 to 5. And I don't know, when it first came in, I was saying to myself, well, things change. It's the nature of life. Jolene, I think, bought that property not to just let it be what it was, but to make money from it. She has every right to make money from it. It's just changing the whole nature of a place that I have lived a long time. And I realize I have to maybe just suck that up. But I just can't not say it's heartbreaking to me. It's heartbreaking to me. I'd like to see things like, if it's going to be that tall and a big flat roof, why don't you put solar panels on it? Why don't you do something about affordable housing, like the Guile Street development in Hanover, where there's a certain number of affordable housing units within there? There just are ways that it could be made more, what I think, friend, you used the word congenial or something like that. Why couldn't it be more friendly and not just so stark in a fairly obvious money-making way? I mean, that's the culture of our U.S. economy is built on, dare I say, greed, or making as much money as you can. And in listening tonight, I really will say, Jolene and all of you, that you're backing away from that, and I appreciate that. I mean, there is this, at least verbally, there's this sense to make it more friendly and amenable to Lebanon. And the fact that it was put in, I mean, I have to say this is disturbing to me, that the code for the area changed as of January 1st. And so these plans were put in very quickly. The first meeting I was invited to as an abutter was, I think, October, and plans weren't ready. And then it was November and plans weren't ready. I'd get to the meeting and be sent home. And that feels to me, I have no idea, but it just has this feeling of, let's get it in under the wire. They're changing the code. I just feel uneasy with it. And I wish I could be more specific, but there I am saying what I'm saying. And
appreciate it.
That's it.
That was very clear. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Someone else from the public.
Mr. Chair, may I speak? This is Barry Schuster. Am I picking up?
We can hear you, Barry.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to go back to the very opening that Mr. Corwin and Mr. Brooks made about the case in the town of Hanover and what's the burden of proof. And it's not on the abutters to disprove the application, but rather it's on the applicant to prove each and every element of the application. And I'd just like to make that clear. And apparently between the waivers and the specific and even general terms of the ordinance, the applicant has not satisfied that. I did submit a letter on April 13th, but I just wanted to note that Emerson Gardens, which looks like the twin of this, does have access all around the back of it. And so certainly in the event of an emergency, a fire apparatus could get through. I'll reserve my further comments for another meeting, but thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
I'd like to.
Other people from the public.
Yes. I would like to speak, Laura Harris Hirsch.
Yes, please. Where?
Yes. Yeah, Laura Hirsch. I live on 24 Green Street, the corner of Elm. So I'm a member of the neighborhood. I'm out and about quite a bit. I've lived here for many years. I did send an email, which you may not have gotten in your packet yet, but I won't review that except to reiterate that I'm very concerned about the traffic flow. I think that suppose you have two cars leaving, or 20 20 cars leaving at 7:50 and 20 cars leaving at 8:05. That's actually not a small number of cars. I'd like to point out that there are no sidewalks next to the driveways. This is a safety issue. People, including children, will have to walk in the driveways, including in icy weather. Are there any sidewalks leading building to building and to the street? And can bikes be safely walked to the street? Regarding access, fire access to the back of the building, it does abut on Green Street there's a wooden fence, and there are all wooden buildings on Green Street. It was mentioned that many apartment buildings today don't have fire access around the total perimeter, but many apartments today don't have any buildings or homes behind, so perhaps fire access is not needed. For purposes of liability of the city, I'd like to have a record of who is the official of the fire department who spoke with the planner and was quoted by the planner. Was he or she qualified to make the judgment? Did they provide an approved by the department, by the city, written report? If the garage requires mechanical ventilation, I assume there would be not only fumes, but noise for the renters and the abutters. Finally, I'd like to say regarding Ms. Cohn's comment that I know some of the people who live in the rooming house. They're very fine people. I don't think that judging people on age, on whether or not they require emergency services, etc., is a bona fide reason to support this project. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Someone else from the public. Do we have anyone else from the public?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, my name is Jim Filiano. I live at 44 Bank Street, which is a few houses down from where this property will be. I appreciate the comments of our neighbor at 18, Mrs. Cole, who it was in the house she described as the beautiful Victorian with the turret. And I think that's important because she has pride in a beautiful structure that lends character to the city. That's part of the nature of the city. And back in, I think it was 1992, Lebanon was selected as in the top 3 or maybe the top town to live in the United States in the US News and World Report. And the green, buildings around the city center, the green, have a special role in maintaining the character and the elegance of any place. And others have described this as Soviet architecture, and it's like that. It's like a shopping mall in its structure, a nice structure in and of itself, but I don't think appropriate. How do I get in? I don't think appropriate for the structure, the buildings, the place, and the character of the city center. I think that Emerson Gardens are a beautiful place, but they're a perfect place where they are, and they have their own elegance by being there. But this is changing much of the place, much of the character of the town that was once such a lovely place, and that's our concern for it, especially the larger structure that is, in fact, like the size of the garages, like the size of the Whitman Press. I thank you for listening.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Raise your hand.
Someone else from the public. I can see you. I can't hear you.
Hello? You can't hear
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, go ahead.
You can hear me?
You can turn off your camera and we can hear you.
Okay. I live on 4 Green Street.
By yourself.
George Armstrong.
George, where do you live?
4 Green Street.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
I'm very concerned about the fact that the apartments facing my backyard are going to have balconies. We live right next to one apartment house now, and the noise level can be quite extensive at night. And I'm afraid that being elderly or being a little older, we tend to go to bed at night fairly early. And I'm just afraid there'll be an undue amount of extra noise in the neighborhood.
Thank you for that. We'll take that up as when we get back to our discussions. That's an important point. Other persons?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is Robin Carpenter.
Yes, Robin.
Hi, I live at 41 Bank Street. We've been forewarned from Tim Corwin at the beginning of this that the board is not going to be interested in the scale and character of existing neighborhoods or type and intensity of proposed use and all those other things in the site plan regulations. So I'm not going to talk about those, although I think they're deplorable. I do want to mention that the several things that were even discussed tonight. One is the landscape compliance or non-compliance, the desire for waivers to not have to comply. It sounds to me, hearing the applicant talk about the problem of that compliance, is the applicant is saying, I have a building I want to build. And because I want to build it, I can't comply. So it seems to me it should be the board, if anyone, who pushes back on that and says, no, no, no. We have rules, and they include some landscaping and some setbacks and all those kinds of things. And you have to design your building to comply with that. They're turning it upside down on its head. Secondly, the idea of putting a couple of park benches on the property and calling that providing for recreation seems ludicrous. Most important, well, two other important things. One is lighting. When you go to a bike committee for approval of your idea for lighting, the bike committee necessarily has in mind having enough lighting to satisfy themselves. Whereas from a neighbor's point of view, from a neighborhood point of view, your concern is to not have too much lighting. So the fact that the bike committee has given its blessing, it seems to me not relevant to the neighborhood concerns. Similarly, or not along the same line of lighting, the notion that it's mentioned in passing that 2 foot candles of lighting is required and they want to do 7. Well, what's, from the neighborhood point of view, you just want to multiply by more than 3 times the amount of lighting you're throwing out into the neighborhood. Finally, I just want to mention, and this will be final, the traffic analysis is laughable. It's laughable. If I were Mr. Bruno, I would be embarrassed if he comes around and just walks through the parking lot some morning or afternoon. He'll find there is nowhere near 22 cars coming, nothing. Sometimes there are 3 or 4 cars in the lot. And most of those don't move from day to day. So the idea that there's not going to be a major traffic change is just silly, and the board shouldn't even entertain it. Get a real study or go home. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for that. All right. I promised 2 hours. We're coming up on 2 hours. So I'm going to close the public portion. Now understand that we're not finished our debates. We're going to come back to this in much more detail. This was a good introduction, an overview, and the beginning of our debates. What I need now is a date for our next meeting, which will continue this discussion. David, what would you suggest?
Well, thank you. This is David Brooks. The June 8th, which is your next regular meeting, the agenda for that meeting is already quite long, with 2 of the other large mountain support projects continued to that date. So we had said we were considering the following week, and again, continue to give this application special attention. We're looking at Tuesday, June 16th to see if the board, if we could get a quorum of board members available on the Tuesday, the 16th.
So unfortunately, I can't turn left and right to see heads going up and down. So I'm just going to ask for a straw vote from people. And then if that sounds like a doable date, I'll ask for a formal motion. So I am good with that. Gregorio, Gregorio, the 16th, does that work for you? Well, let me do it this differently. Let me ask for people who, board members who object to the 16th.
Councillor Winnie, not necessarily a formal objection. I'm just not sure what my schedule is that.
Understood. Understood. I think we all realize that we need a special meeting, given the amount of discussion that we've had tonight, as an indication the amount of discussion will continue. So that having been said, may I ask one of you to make a motion to continue this until June 10th?
16th.
Matt, this is Councillor Hill with a point of procedure.
Who's this?
Councillor Karen Leo Hill with a point of procedure.
You're in the public.
Any member of the public, I will be Joe Q with a point of procedure. Has the public hearing been ended, or is the public still allowed to make comment?
No, I ended the public hearing. I said that I was
But
ending
I
it.
was not able to. I was not able to make my comment, and I don't know whether there are other members of the public who were able to make their comment.
I'm sure that there are. We just didn't have time. I allotted half an hour, and we're not going to extend this meeting until midnight. So,
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
To jump in, I do not think you have closed the public hearing. I think we have closed it for this evening. But the public hearing remains open because there are still many, many questions yet to be answered.
That's what I indicated. We'd be back to this at our next meeting, for which we need a motion to continue it. And that will include the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Martz, and I will make that motion, but do you want it on the 16th of June, which is a Tuesday, or do you want it on the 15th of June, which is a Monday?
The 16th, because some of the staff have conflicts with a zoning board meeting on the 15th.
Okay, then I move that this meeting be continued until June 16th.
Thank you for that, Tom.
Monroe seconds it.
Thank you, Joan. Any
Monroe
discussion?
Monroe has discussion.
Yes.
I guess we'll find out as our votes go along, but you didn't hear from people, so because you said who can't come, and one person said I have to check my schedule, but you assumed that everyone could hear you and knew, you made an assumption, and I have to say that we can't do that while we're on these Teams meetings, because earlier in the meeting, for some reason, I got thrown off, and so I basically redid my procedure to get back on. But it has never shown me again that I'm in this meeting, which is very weird. But
You're
So-
clearly in the meeting. We can see you and hear
Right,
you.
right. But I'm not listed anywhere, and I should be. So anyway, I suppose we'll find out if people can come when they vote yes or no.
Right.
Okay, shoot.
Hopefully we can do this in one shot and not multiple shots.
Okay.
So I vote in favor. Gregorio? Gregorio?
Well, he did recuse himself from this project, didn't he?
No.
Sorry. the other
Dartmouth.
one.
No, Gregorio votes in favor.
Thank you. Jim?
Counselor Winnie votes in favor.
Joan?
Monroe votes in favor.
Laurel?
Laurel votes in favor.
Kathy?
Kathy votes yes.
And Tom?
Tom votes yes.
And hopefully Matt Hall will make the meeting. So none of us are committed to it, but at least we have a game plan, and this discussion is continued until a June 16th meeting. And I thank all the people in the public. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everyone tonight. We've got lots more to discuss, and there'll be time for other people from the public at the next meeting. All right, we're now moving to committee reports. And I will ask David David Brooks to give give us a review where we stand with, in particular, vacancies on various committees.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So we have several board and committee vacancies that are open at moment with the recent loss of Mr. Cole and Ms. Welch. I know that there are now 2 vacancies on the Capital Improvement Program subcommittee. I believe Mr. Martz has put his hat in the ring for that particular subcommittee. There are also vacancies on the Heritage Commission and the Ped Bike Advisory Committee, which again, I believe Mr. Martz has offered his name for the Ped Bike Committee. There are vacancies with the Upper Valley Transportation Management Association, as well as the Steering Committee for the implementation of the master plan, which again, Mr. Martz has offered his name for that committee as well. So there are a number of board and committee openings. It would be good to get Mr. Martz appointed if you so choose for the board, and to fill some of these other vacancies. I know they're just coming open, so people may not have had an opportunity to think about them.
All right, so what I'd like to do is ask a member to make a motion appointing Tom to the 3 committees that David just mentioned.
Monroe says so moved.
Thank you. This should be easy, getting a volunteer, right? A second to that?
Kathy, I second.
Thank you, Kathy. Any discussion on having Tom on those 3 committees? So I will call for a vote. I'm in favor. Gregorio?
Unmute.
Gregorio's in favor.
Thank you. Jim?
Counselor Winnie's in favor.
Joan?
Monroe is in favor.
Laurel?
Laurel's in favor.
Kathy?
Kathy votes yes.
And Tom?
I'm in favor.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tom. We very much appreciate it. I would ask other members to consider the other vacancies that we have.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just to recap, there remain vacancies on Capital Improvement Program. That meets once to anywhere between 1 and 3 meetings over the summer. There's a vacancy there. There's a vacancy with the Heritage Commission, Upper Valley Transportation Management Association, and the Steering Committee for the implementation of the master plan.
And if you have any interest in the city finances, I can tell you the CIP program is just fascinating. I highly recommend that.
Mr. Chair, David?
Yes.
What time does that committee meet usually?
Last year, they met at 5:30 and we provided a meal.
And are there days of the week?
It is nothing specific. We send out a doodle poll or inquire of the members as to when they're available. And it's based on sort of when we get the capital improvement program ready to bring to you, which normally happens mid to late July.
I would be willing to volunteer for that.
Excellent. So can I have a motion from someone to appoint Laurel to the CIP committee?
This is Kathy, so moved.
Thank you, Kathy.
Monroe seconds.
I think Joan beat you, Tom. So Joan second. So any discussion? I'm in favor. Gregorio?
Gregorio's in favor.
Jim?
Counselor Winnie's in favor.
Joan?
Monroe is in favor.
Laurel?
I'm not sure I can vote on that one, but
yes, you can.
Sure, I'm in favor.
Kathy?
Kathy votes yes.
And Tom?
I vote yes.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. Again, there's some other vacancies. I urge members to give them some consideration. Anything else, David, before I ask for committee reports?
No.
All right, so I'm going to lead off with one committee report. I'm not going to go through all of them, just ask if people do have them. I think you'll be delighted to hear this one. I am a member of the subcommittee of the Connecticut River Joint Commission, which received a notification from the New Hampshire Department of Transport of their plans to demolish the buildings at Westboro. And I participated on Friday in a site visit, which was absolutely fascinating, where we discussed with representatives of DOT who are just getting the process going, but are also hopeful of putting bids out towards the end of June to get this work done. They recognize that there are issues such as asbestos in at least one of the buildings. The area is apparently, Joan will not be happy with this, but completely invaded by invasive species. So there are a lot of issues, including trucking all of the brick, unless it can be recycled somehow, off to the city dump. But at least it's in motion.
Mr. Chair, I have a question about that. This is Laurel.
Yes, Laurel.
Last I heard about that project was that it was going to be delayed because of the COVID-19 budget problems.
That may turn out to be the case, but I can tell you these people were there with plans and ideas and documentation. So I'm taking the good signs that I saw.
That's very good news.
And the Upper Valley.
Chair?
Yeah.
Was your meeting in person or was it?
It was a site visit. So there were 5 people from a subcommittee and 2 people from DOT. And the head of the subcommittee has put together a letter which will be submitted to the Wetlands Bureau and is being reviewed as we speak by the subcommittee that is meeting this evening.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, one more question from Laurel. Sure. Was the city manager part of that subcommittee?
No, he's not a member of that this subcommittee. Subcommittee consists of representatives of 8 towns on both sides of the Connecticut River.
Thank you.
Chair, this is Kathy. I have a quick question.
Sure.
Is there any thought given to preserving the footprint of that roundhouse, or is the whole presence of that railroad going to be obliterated in the cleanup?
It will be dug down. Foundations will be dug down at least a foot and then covered over for planting. That is the plan. Now, I don't know where coordination with the city lies at this point in time.
Mr. Chair, I can speak to that. As you have kept the planning department up to date on both the site walk and a copy of that letter, they have been forwarded to the city manager. So he's aware that the state is continuing with its due diligence work in the hope that the funding will be there when they're ready to move forward. With respect to the footprint and of the buildings and the railroad history associated with it, I think it was part of the West Lebanon Village visioning charrette that would be ideal. There would certainly be opportunities to, if not work with the literal foundation of the structure, but to more or less recreate it in some fashion, depending on how things move forward. But I believe, having seen the letter that Mr. Garland sent to me earlier tonight, which is, again, that is a sort of a preliminary draft of what the Upper Valley River Subcommittee would be submitting to the state. It mentions in the project description that the footings would be removed to a foot below grade, and that the area would be seeded with, it would be graded and seeded for grass. So those are, what happens after that, if the city gets control and the request is still pending, then we can definitely have the conversation and the discussion about how best to preserve the history of that property.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, it's Laurel again. Can I ask one final question about Westboro?
Sure.
During your site visit, was the footprint of Rhymes Propane discussed at all?
No. We were next door to it, so we obviously saw it, but no.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, do we need an extension? Do we have to do these other two reviews?
Yes, we do. So I was going to hold off an extension but this is a good time. So can I have a motion to extend by 15 minutes, please? We've got two other pieces of business and approval of minutes. Kathy for an extension and a second.
Second, Laurel.
Laurel, thank you. Any discussion? So I'm going to go quickly. I vote in favor. Gregorio?
Gregorio votes in favor.
Jim?
Councilor Winnie votes in favor.
Joan? Joan, you still with us? Laurel?
I'm here.
Are you voting in favor of the extension?
I'm sorry, yes.
Kathy?
Kathy votes yes.
Tom?
I vote yes.
Joan?
It does appear she has
we lost her.
Has been lost from the meeting at least temporarily.
All right. So thank you for that. Any other reports from committee members? All right, great. So let's move on to the two other documents that require comment to City Council. David, would you please introduce them?
Yes, sir. So there are two requests for review and comment to the City Council relative to the potential disposition of property that is deemed surplus to city needs. I'll go through them in order. The agenda item 4A relates to the property at the corner of Foch Avenue and Edwards Street. And I think Ms. Monroe is joining us again. This is a property, it's on the unbuilt portion of Foch Avenue up against the Interstate 89, just east of the Exit 18 interchange. It's a very small parcel, total, I believe, of less than a half acre or so. And there's an adjoining property owner who is interested in acquiring a portion of that property. So the property disposition process that the city council uses for real property transactions requires the city manager to solicit input from all relevant boards, committees, commissions, as well as the school district. If the board is generally in support of this disposition, I think you can reflect that with your comments. If you are opposed to this property disposition and would rather vote to retain the property, you should probably do that in the form of a motion. And very, very quickly, the second, if you want to do them together.
Let's do one at a time. Let's do one at a time. So,
okay, fair enough.
The Foch, which is next to Pershing, was obviously a World War I design part of the city. I'm in favor of.
Can we comment first?
Sure, please.
This is Kathy. A lot of that area is floodplain. I'm not sure if this lot is involved, but a question and a comment. The question would be, if it does sell to the neighboring abutter who's expressed interest, would the city then vacate that unbuilt part of the road, and that would just also be sold to the new owner? And that's a question. And the comment is, there have been a number of properties in that little quadrant which have recently gone under agreement or are still for sale. So there may be other people that are interested in that lot as well. A lot of properties changing hands right there now.
To address those questions, yes, I believe it is proposed as part of the process that the city would throw up that portion of Foch Avenue as part of this transaction. That would have to be done as a separate step. But upon doing so, I believe the properties owned to the center line of the road right of way. So the center land area would be merged to the both adjoining properties. And it is not, according to the floodplain maps on the city's GIS, it is actually not in a floodplain. It's got floodplains on two sides, both north and south of it, but it is not shown in a floodplain.
Any other comments?
And just actually, just one last comment on Ms. Romano's question. There is a process if the city manager makes a determination that there is sort of enhanced public benefit. I forget, and I'm probably using the wrong term there, with respect to transferring this property to an adjoining parcel, as opposed to making it available through a bidding process. There's a process by which the city manager can do that. In this case, where there is no other physical road frontage at the moment, to put it out to bid, I think would require that section of Foch Avenue to be built, which may sort of defeat the purpose.
Does anyone have an objection to this? I think, David, all we need to do is say to the city council that no one objected, correct?
I think that is sufficient. If there's general support, yes.
So do we have any objection to Foch? All right, I don't hear anyone. So David, let's move on to the second one.
Just one thing. I got, can you hear me, Bruce?
Yes, well, I can hear you.
Okay. I was thrown off the computer I was using, and I'm back on, but I'm listed as Clifford Carey, but it's me.
We know. You missed the vote on the extension, but we kept it to 15 minutes, Joan.
That's okay. Okay.
All right, so David, the second one.
Yeah, yes, the second potential property disposition relates to a property out between Fellows Hill Road and Riverside Drive. It's roughly a little bit less, under a half an acre in size. The property's owned it since 2000. Again, you can see in the agenda packet where this property is. It's near Dartmouth College Highway, Route 4, heading towards Enfield, but it is accessed from what is called Fellows Hill Road, which comes off of Riverside Drive. And again, one of the adjoining property owners has expressed an interest in this property, potentially to have the road between discontinued so that it could be merged together.
That is literally the road to nowhere. I've been up that road. I have no opposition to this. Other people's comments.
Joan here?
Yes,
Monroe
Joan.
here? I
Yes.
think it looks like a good idea to let the, whichever person, it's not clear to me whether it's the person on which side of the road that wants it, but then they'll be able to get rid of all that pavement and have a bigger property. Of course, their tax bill will go up a little bit, but it seems like a good idea.
Other comments?
I'm just
Thank you for
thinking that owner has some sort of trash hauling business, and if I'm thinking of the owner next to the
parcel.
You may be right, Kathy. I'm trying to remember
Yeah,
when I was there last.
the family that has expressed interest is Oaks, is the Oaks family. Robert Oaks.
Not sure which one of the.
In any event, any negative comments? So David, I don't hear anybody, so I think that we can tell the council that we're fine with them moving ahead on this.
Okay, thank you very much.
And then the last item of business is the minutes. So minutes from April 27th, 20. I had a couple of.
Chair,
Yeah.
this Kathy, can I just ask a quick question about that last property?
Yep.
Have the other abutters been notified that the city is thinking of vacating that property or selling that property?
I don't know the exact process. I think